Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan Last, COO of Catholic Energies. I appreciate everybody making the time this afternoon to participate in our Introduction to Catholic Energies webinar. We are going to give folks just a couple more minutes past the hour to get themselves logged in here, and we'll probably get going at about 2 or 3 past the hour. So sit tight, and we'll get started shortly. If at any point you're having issues with audio or technical issues, you should see an area to enter questions. Just go ahead and type a question in there, and pause. One of our staff members, one of my colleagues will help you with that. Otherwise, we'll get started shortly. For those of you just joining us, we're going to get started in about a minute here, just giving folks another minute or two to log on. All right, so we are going to get started. Again, thank you to everyone for joining. Again, introduce myself. My name is Dan Last. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Catholic Energies. Really look forward to introducing all of you to our program this afternoon. Just a few quick sort of technical housekeeping items. All of you should see an area to ask questions on your control bar for GoToWebinar. If at any point during the slides you've got questions, you should go ahead and enter them there, and I'll probably scan them. There's a couple points during the presentation when I'm pretty sure folks, if they're going to have questions, will have them there. I will scan the questions section before I move on past those parts of the presentation. Otherwise, we'll probably circle back and cover most of the other questions at the end of the presentation. So I plan on leaving roughly 20 minutes or so towards the end to make sure that we've got time to do that. I will be joined shortly by another partner of ours, Mark Simmons, who is going to help discuss our solar program. But I'll cover the first part of the presentation, give you the overview of Catholic Energies, how we work, and specifically our programs dealing with energy efficiency. So here's our overview. We'll start off with an overview of what is the Catholic Energies program, what our mission is, the problem and opportunity that we are seeking to address, how we're different from other organizations, other companies that you may be familiar with, and then really dive into the nuts and bolts on our approach, both on the energy efficiency side and the solar side. And we'll wrap it up with a very important discussion about education and how we work that into the program as well. So first, what is Catholic Energies? We are the first nonprofit program focused only on Catholic facilities. And we help Catholic facilities identify, implement, and pay for energy projects. Our approach enables you to execute all energy projects without costing any money upfront. And I want to make that very clear. So this is a big, I would say, point of differentiation for the Catholic Energies program. Our approach enables you to make sure that no worthy project is shelved. If you have a project that can reduce your energy costs, improve the comfort and quality of your buildings, we ensure that you can do so without laying out a single dollar. Our program is comprehensive, and as I said, it enables you to move forward with projects of all types so that you guys don't have to sit on projects anymore, and they focus on these four main areas: energy procurement, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and storage. I'm going to focus, for the purpose of this introductory webinar, we're going to really focus on bullet points 2 and 3, energy efficiency and renewable energy, primarily solar. Energy procurement, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, not everybody is going to live in a state where this is possible, but there are states that are what's known as deregulated states, which means that you can purchase electricity and or natural gas from any provider you choose. Where this is possible, and I know many parishes, many organizations may already do this, but those that don't, where this is possible, we can save you money off of your utility bills simply by signing a very simple new contract with a different provider. And again, if you have specific questions on that, please do type them into the questions area or follow up with me afterwards. But we're going to focus mostly on efficiency and renewable energy. Our mission. We started off the program to help Catholic facilities reduce their energy waste. We want to make sure that you have more resources to put towards your mission-related activities and not paying your utility bills. And also to provide education and resources to enable Catholics to live their faith authentically. An important note here, the Catholic Energies program is a program of the Catholic Climate Covenant. We are not a separate nonprofit organization. This is a program of the Catholic Climate Covenant. I'm pretty sure that most folks on the webinar are probably on the webinar because you received the Catholic Energies newsletter, which means that you also received the Catholic Climate Covenant's newsletter. So I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with the Catholic Climate Covenant, but real quickly, been around for about 12 years, focused primarily on education, advocacy, and outreach to Catholics around issues related to care for creation, care for the poor, and the environment. And we developed the energy program late in 2016 and piloted it in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, relaunched the program with a national focus last fall, and we are now in the process of growing that program into a variety of other areas, really focusing on the efficiency and solar parts of our program. So we began with a simple question. Why aren't Catholic facilities able to identify and invest in energy-saving projects more easily? And we identified 3 areas that we felt we could Catholic Energies could help solve. The first problem, lack of bandwidth. I have worked with Fortune 100 companies and I have worked with small Catholic parishes, and it is pretty much universal that it is rarely somebody's job to proactively look for opportunities to save energy. And that is really our singular focus. So while you are focusing, your business managers, facility managers, pastors, teachers, principals are focused on carrying out their day-to-day jobs, which does not involve looking for ways to save energy, that again is where we are focused entirely. A lack of trust, we think, also pervades the industry. There are a lot of shady players out there who are trying to purvey certain materials, certain services that are not in the best interest or would not be in the best interest of your organizations to take part in. We also try to bring an educational component to this. So we try to bridge that trust gap to make it so that your organizations, your parishes, have a trusted resource that you can lean on to help get these projects done and answer your questions. And lastly, and this will be a big focus of the presentation in a minute, is a lack of money. Resource constraint, we know, is always going to be an issue, but we want to make sure that, again, as I said earlier, no worthy project gets shelved because of a lack of resources. And we have very innovative programs to help make that possible. Real quick overview of the opportunity. It is a fact. For energy use in buildings, 40% of it is wasted. We know that there are more than 100,000 Catholic-owned facilities in the United States. And again, doing some very simple math, that means that collectively Catholic facilities are wasting more than $1 billion a year. And this is really what we're seeking to change with the Catholic Energies program by making it easier to, again, identify, execute, and pay for energy projects. How are we different? First of all, our comprehensive approach assures that you're not going to have to manage multiple vendors. Going back to the personnel resource constraints that I was discussing earlier, it is, again, rarely somebody's job to deal with this. And I think that one big barrier, or we think that one big barrier, is just simply fear of having to manage multiple vendors, rebate applications, incentives, utilities, permits. Who's got the time? Again, we allow you to deal with a single point of contact to get all of these projects done. Again, lighting, HVAC, controls projects, those are very complicated projects to find people to work collaboratively on, but we believe it's vital to look at all those types of projects when trying to mitigate energy use in buildings. Again, I'm going to come back to this point quite a bit. We ensure that you will not have to pay anything upfront to implement our projects, and that includes not paying us for our services. Catholic Energies, we make the money that we make as a nonprofit from vendors. So vendors pay us a small fee every time a project is completed that we have brought them. So it enables us to bring our services to you without having to charge an upfront consulting fee. And finally, and very importantly, we are Catholic just like you. So we share your mission and your values. And we know that for many of you, if not all of you, you are doing this for reasons other than just sheer economics, and we keep that in mind every day. So we're going to start with kind of dive into the meat and potatoes here with a series of, and I apologize, rhetorical questions. But we try to take a new approach to facilities upgrade. So this is the part of the presentation where I'm going to cover primarily issues around lighting, HVAC, so heating, ventilating, air conditioning, so heating and cooling, and controls. And ask yourself a simple question. If a lighting upgrade saves money and a paving project does not, why would your organization want to pay for these projects in the same way? Just as an aside here, it is probably the case for many of your organizations that your typical process goes something like this. You identify a need or multiple needs. You execute a capital campaign, raise as much money as you can towards those projects, and then deploy those resources, perhaps filling in the gap with some sort of loan if it is needed. But again, that's a great way to execute a project that doesn't have a return on investment, but a lighting project, an HVAC project, a solar project, they all do. So we are, again, encouraging you to think about these projects differently. And the follow-up to that is, why pay for the light bulb when what you really want is the lighting? Enter the technology subscription. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on the next two slides here, and then this will be one of the moments when I do pause to take a look at the question section because I'm going to cover quite a bit of information here. The technology subscription allows you to implement, energy projects. So imagine a lighting project without any upfront capital. You pay for the project via one monthly payment that covers installation, repairs, monitoring, and ongoing service of those lights. So wherever you are today, taking this webinar, take a look around you. Imagine your building that you're in, or if you're at your home, imagine the building where you may go to work, or imagine your parish. And imagine being able to go through and upgrade every single one of the lighting fixtures in that building without having to pay a single dollar to the lighting vendor doing the work. And that includes the upfront cost to do the assessment and the cost of ownership. So I had a parish that we delivered a proposal to last week who put some numbers together for me. And last year, they paid more than $7,000 to maintain the lights in their facility. So every time lights were burned out in their very high sanctuary, they had to rent a lift to get folks up there, pay for the labor time to do that. All of that is a thing of the past for the technology subscription. So that is all included. So any routine maintenance, any burnouts, if it is an HVAC company doing work, the boiler, the filter replacements, all of that is covered under the technology subscription. You pay one monthly cost to get access to everything. Just as an aside here, think of this sort of a good way to understand this. Copy machines is probably the easiest example. So copy machines, many of you probably have them in your offices or know the scenario where you don't own the copy machine. You would lease the copy machine or rent the copy machine, pay a monthly fee, and at the end of, let's say, 5 years, the machine company will call you and ask you if you want to own that copy machine to which you probably will reply, no, I don't want a 5-year-old copier, give me a new one. And you just re-up your contract to get access to the copies, which is what you really want. You want the ability to make copies. You don't necessarily want the copier. The same thing would go for lighting. The same thing would go for lighting. In this example, you wouldn't own the lights. You would get access to the lighting, and that would be what you would be paying the monthly fee for, is access to the lighting and all of the maintenance and support services around that. A very simple, short, easy to execute contract. And again, that no risk guarantee. So we are guaranteeing that the performance will always be there. The lights will function as it specifies in the contract. The boiler will function in the same way. If it does not, you don't pay. So again, very important to understand that you only pay if the performance is there. Let me walk through how it works a bit more, and then this will be the point at which I'll stop after this slide to take any questions that I see here that have come up about this. So this will be a great time to ask questions about the technology subscription. So the first part of our process is you're participating in it today, obviously, but we would want to do an introduction to, let's say, the CFOs, business managers, whoever is in your organization that's going to be making a decision about how to proceed, how to pay for really a project. Second step is to define what we call the success criteria. And what that means is, how is your organization, how is your parish, how is your school going to define success? And what I mean by that is, for some organizations on some projects, success is defined as saving money. For others, it is making the building more comfortable. I'll tell you a quick story here. I was evaluating a parish boiler project in north of Cincinnati, Ohio. And the pastor came up to me and said, semi-jokingly, or at least I thought, oh, I bet you didn't know that I say a prayer, a blessing over this boiler every October 15th. And I sort of laughed and thought he was kidding. And then the business manager came over to me and showed me his phone and said, no, really, here he is saying a blessing over the boiler. And I tell that story because I think that there is absolutely a cause for moving ahead with projects just because it's going to make the facility better. And I really do want to highlight that some projects are not going to save as much money as others, but they still might be worthwhile projects to move forward with. And that's what I mean by defining the success criteria. We then come out and perform an audit. And it really, I would rather call this an assessment. So we identify, you have said to us, let's just take an example, our boiler is failing and we know we need new lights. We are going to deploy somebody to your facility, identify and provide you with a proposal to replace those lights and replace that boiler. And I'm going to show you, I'm actually just going to click ahead one slide here so you can see what it looks like. This is a sample proposal, so you can understand sort of how simply the information is presented to you. What you get basically is a proposal that looks like this, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner, the total value of the technology subscription in this example, $87,000, almost $500. And then the top right-hand section under your subscription, you're paying $1,682 a month and getting access to this example here that you're looking at is a lighting retrofit project. So no, you do not have to come up with $87,000 to execute the project. All you need to do is see your utility costs drop. And as you see here, the second line, the $21,225, that's how much money annually this facility is going to save on electricity. And for that, they're going to pay $1,682 a month, and they're going to have a full performance guarantee. That's all they need to know. So we try to make it very, very simple for your parish to move forward, or your facility to move forward with an upgrade. I'm going to move back one slide here. Obviously, then we would sign a technology subscription. I'm drastically speeding things along here, but there's obviously going to be a conversation that goes along with that. And then you leave all of the upgrades to us. So we take care of identifying the contractors to do the work. Let me highlight here as well, we prioritize working with local contractors whenever and wherever possible. So we are not going to bring in somebody nationally and push out the little guy. We do work with national providers, but they're always going to prioritize working with a local company out of a necessity because they don't go everywhere, first of all, and also because we believe it's the right thing to do. I'm going to actually stop on this slide and just give me a second, folks. I'm just going to look over. I know there have been some questions that have been asked here. So let me just take a look and see. So question one, again, local service providers. Let me just give a little bit more information about that. The question is, do you work with local service providers? The answer is yes, we do, as I mentioned. And again, that doesn't just involve the installation of the equipment. It also includes the maintenance. For example, going back to my boiler example, if you're installing a new boiler, you want to make sure that the firm that's servicing that boiler is located pretty close to you, because you don't want to have a firm coming in from hundreds of miles away if your boiler doesn't work on a Sunday morning. Obviously, we're going to prioritize finding a local company, often a company that you may already have a relationship with, to do a project. Another question, how do you benchmark a church or school facilities? That's a really good question. So let me just make it clear. We want to save your campus, I'll use as a sort of catch-all term, money and energy. All of our projects do just that. However, some are more cash flow positive than others. Unlike some contracts out there that require energy savings to be part of the contract, we don't require that, because as I mentioned, we want to be able to help you execute projects like a boiler replacement project that might save a nominal amount of money annually, because you may have to cut the equipment out. There's sometimes where there's asbestos involved, so issues like that. So we don't require benchmarking. We do, however, have a partnership with the EPA, so we can get facilities benchmarked for free and get your materials into Portfolio Manager. And we also have a partnership with a company that for a very small amount of money, we're talking low hundreds of dollars a year, can provide you access to a dashboard and also keep that benchmark up to date. So on a monthly basis, as your energy use changes, they will keep your benchmark up to date. So those of you who may live in places where you have to benchmark, and there are a number of cities and municipalities around the country where that's the case, our program would allow you to deal with that as well. Question about leasing lighting. This is similar to a lighting lease, although the term lease is going to become a thing not of the past necessarily. It's going to be used a lot less frequently. Leases are going to be not, I don't want to get too technical here, going to be considered a balance sheet item going forward. So this subscription approach allows you to get the same benefits of the lease, but for organizations that care for it, it would be considered an operating cost and wouldn't become a liability on a balance sheet. And again, if you have further questions about that, ping me afterwards, and I'm happy to get into more details. And let's see if there are any questions here. So a question about who would qualify. So a congregation of women religious communities. Absolutely. Actually, one of our facilities we're working on is the Sisters of Mercy facility. So we have a lot of experience doing that. Individual facilities within that community, it depends on what type of program. It would be hard to do this on a sort of small facility, like a very small home by small home basis. But a housing that's sort of collective housing, or a number of those houses together, this absolutely would work just fine. There's no maximum size for a project. That was another question that came up here. How any project size would work. There really is no minimum size, although, you know, it becomes less economical to do projects in this way once we get below, you know, $20,000 probably. But again, project by project, certainly we would take a look at everything. And I'll talk about utility rates in just a bit. That's actually probably a better topic to discuss when it comes time to talk about solar. But again, I'm reading the questions that have come in so far, but there's certainly an opportunity to ask more questions along the way. But let me just summarize this section here by saying, consider that what we are doing here is trying to make it possible for your facilities, your organizations, to not have to lay out a single dollar to do these projects. So go back to what I said earlier about most facilities that we've dealt with deal with capital projects, whether it be a carpeting project or a lighting project or a paving project, all in the same way. We want you to think about projects that relate to energy, so your lighting projects, your HVAC projects, your controls projects, differently than you think about those other projects. and that would allow you to use this technology subscription to move those projects ahead. Okay, I'm going to move on from this portion to solar, and I believe, Mark, if you are there, you want to unmute yourself. Excellent.
I am here.
So let me introduce Mark Simmons, and Mark, just for sake to make it so that we don't have any technical glitches, I am going to control the slides, so I'll just put all the information on the slides for you here. And again, folks, these are slides I've mostly put together. So Mark is going to do a great job reading my material and adding some color to it. Mark is our expert in solar, and I'm going to let him sort of cover details about solar, but high level here, and then I'll let Mark cover the rest. There's a lot of misinformation out there about solar and Catholic facilities, nonprofit facilities, and it is our goal to sort of disabuse you of all of those notions. We want to make it very clear for you that as Catholic facilities, A, and B, virtually any place that you are located in the country, solar is a great option for you. And I'll let Mark talk a little bit more about how.
Okay, thanks, Dan. This is Mark Simmons. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and I have a team of experts in pretty much any area of renewable energy, wind, hydro, biofuels, almost anything you can name. And we're bringing the technologies that make the most sense for each individual project, and we're combining those with some specific energy efficiency equipment. If you can make your building more energy efficient, of course, you would need less solar. And so this combined technology approach provides significantly better economics than just doing a solar project. And Martha, I did see your question, so I'll address that in a little bit about utility rate increases. So the process is that all of the work can be done pretty much online with the tools that are available to us. If we're working in the USA, the National Renewable Energy Lab has mapped every square meter of the country for solar radiation for over 30 years. So with your latitude and longitude, we know how much solar radiation hits your roof. And that takes into account all atmospheric conditions, clouds, snow, precipitation, even particulates in the air. The further into the city you are, the more particulates there might be in the air. And so we can get an annual production calculation based on your exact location. If we're working outside the country, like we're working with a Catholic mission in Tijuana, Mexico, I can go to a site that the NASA runs, and NASA's mapped every square meter of the planet. So the science of calculating the production on solar panels is pretty solid, and the only variables are in the amount of shade you might get for neighboring trees or buildings, or if the calculations involve long distances of sending power. So I think that's probably a place to go ahead and go to the next slide. I do want to tell you that we're working on building an investment fund of all Catholic investors. And we've met some folks in different parts of the country. We've got a project in Corvallis, Oregon, where the local parishioners of the church will be the investors. And we may build a bigger fund from them for other projects around the country. We were just speaking in a webinar with Patterson, New Jersey diocese, and they've got investors they think that would come in, and the Catholic Church itself has an investment fund. So the money would come from those investors who would, of course, use all the tax incentives that are associated with solar, and that would mean the economics for you are far better. So nonprofits can't take these tax incentives, of course, because they're nonprofit, they're not taxable, but any individual or group of taxpayers can take these tax incentives. The typical way to do it is we set up an LLC in the state. Like for Corvallis, Oregon, it's going to be St. Mary's Solar LLC in Corvallis. And the investors put their money into that LLC. The LLC buys the equipment, pays all the contractors to do their work, owns it for a particular period, takes all the tax incentives, and then charges a monthly payment for the term of the agreement with the church. That's basically the setup of it. Now, the tax incentives come in a 30% tax credit, which is, let's say you have a $100,000 project, it's $30,000. And this is a real credit off owed taxes. It's not a deduction. So it's a lot of money that the investors will save off of their federal taxes. The depreciation of the system is commercial equipment. The depreciation is worth another 20–25% of the project. So we're talking more than half of the cost of the project is covered by these federal tax incentives. And then there's the utility bill savings for you. And often there's a local incentive program based on the solar production, basically a carbon credits sort of program that I can explain a little bit more later if you like. In addition, if you have a flat roof on your building and it needs a replacement, we can put a specialized kind of solar panel up there that causes the whole roof to be deemed a solar component. And if anybody wants, I can describe that a little bit more. So therefore, that brand new roof that you need anyway could be folded into the solar project, and the tax incentives will apply, which will get you that brand new roof for basically free in the beginning. Of course, over time, you're going to make some payments, but the savings off the electricity bills in almost every situation I see now are higher than the payments made. It's almost always a cash flow positive situation for the church. Okay, next slide. So this is an example, and this is St. Mary's in Oregon. And their electricity bills are $38,622. We got the last 12 bills and added them all up. And they're charged a rate for the kilowatt hours they actually use. And most utilities in the US already also charge for your peak electrical load, the peak load you have on your building each month, and they're tracking that every 15 minutes. And when all your air conditioning units come on the same time, your electricity load peaks, and they charge you for having that much power available anytime. So in this case, at St. Mary's, 77% of the bill were for the usage and roughly 22 for the demand, the peak electrical demand. And the LED lighting and other energy efficiency equipment that go on the electrical systems all reduce the peak electrical load as well as the usage. And then solar added to it reduces the amount of kilowatt hours you're buying from the utility, so they reduce part of your bill. So you combine these technologies and you get, again, a much better economic scenario. Now, there are numerous states that have some sort of carbon credit program, and every kilowatt hour produced by a renewable energy source like solar earns one carbon credit. It's just a certificate, but the utilities buy these certificates, these carbon credits, to prove to the states they're meeting the renewable energy mandate, and therefore there's an income stream either to the investors or to the church selling the carbon credits over the long term. That does vary state to state pretty widely. There are lots of states that have zero carbon credit value. You'll just get the certificate every year and eventually it might be worth something. Or if you get to the East Coast, you're talking a large income stream in New Jersey and Massachusetts and Washington, D.C. Illinois just launched a program. And of course, we'll look at your electric bills and we'll determine all of the incentive programs that are available, either local or state or national, and put those all into one spreadsheet so you can see all the potential savings and income from these. It says tech right in the middle there on the left, and I'll say that if we installed a power conditioner or maybe more than one on your main electrical panel, the power conditioners make your electrical system run more efficiently and reduce the usage and the peak demand, and relatively speaking, they're fairly low cost. So in the case of St. Mary's, in the illustration in the bottom right is the main chapel, and they've got a flat roof, and they needed that roof to be replaced, so we're replacing it with a white reflective roof, and we're putting a specialized solar panel that has cells on both sides of the solar panel, the top and the bottom, on the roof at a tilt, and the bounce back solar radiation off the roof boosts the production, and therefore the whole roof becomes a solar component for the tax incentives. So we've got that. And then just to the west or the left of the main church, there's a rectangular black box. And the church wants to build a pergola for outdoor events. And so just a wooden structure, and we'll put solar panels on the top of that. And then on the north side, there are a couple other sloped roofs that we'd put solar panels on. So that amount of space, that amount of solar panels at the production we can get, and the power conditioners combined will knock out 100% of the usage of the church, the kilowatt hours, and some of the peak demand. And so out of the $38,600 of electric bills, then when you look down at chartered results, you'll see we're reducing the bills by 26,845, and they got a new roof thrown in for zero down. I know that's an awful lot of information at once. You're welcome to chat any questions. And I want to answer Martha's question about how we reconcile with increase in utility rates. So there are a couple of ways to do that, and I'll try to be brief, and I'll give you a deeper dive later if you like, Martha. Generally, the Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Energy, keeps track of utility rate increases throughout the country, and on average, commercial utility rates are going up 6%. Or excuse me, 4%. The residential rates are going up 6%. Some government experts we're working with say that there are major improvements to the grid that are coming in the next 2 to 5 years, and so rates will spike for a while during that period, but then they'll settle down to about that 4% annual increase. We have noticed through our analysis of hundreds and hundreds of buildings and their utility bills that the peak demand charges are going up a lot faster than the kilowatt hour charges. And so we need to take that into account. When we're financing it, and a form of financing where you pay for the power the solar produces just at a cheaper rate than you would pay the utility, then generally the financing will assume only a 2% utility rate increase per year. And so your financing payments will go up 2%, not 4%. So you might save a little bit more money if the national average holds at 4%, but at least you won't be dinged any if the rates don't go up quite at 4% per year. So that's the way we deal with projecting utility rate increases. And the farther in the future you project, the more dicey the number is anyway. So you want to be conservative about these projections, and you want the financing to even be more conservative than that. Okay, I think we've got another slide. And it's back to Dan.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And so, folks, let me just pause here. First, I know this is a lot of information to take in. We've worked hard to try to boil it down to, as simple as possible. Solar, sort of our assumption is that folks know a bit more about solar because everyone, I would assume on the webinar, has at least heard of it, knows somebody who's done it, has seen a solar program or solar array somewhere. So we covered a bit more of the sort of nitty gritty on that, but this would be a good time. There haven't been a lot of solar questions that have come through, but let me just sort of,
I'm sorry
highlight.
Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Martha had one that's directly applied. I can do it later. Just want to point it out to you.
Yes, I saw it. I think Martha, unfortunately, had to step off the webinar, but let me take a look at her question here just in case it is relevant. But let me just sort of first cover sort of high level about solar. Again, our program is comprehensive, and that's what I think makes the Catholic Energies program unique. What you just heard from Mark, what you heard from me, I'm sure is somewhat confusing to some of you because it's a new way to think about these types of projects. We work to make it so that you don't have to do too much of the heavy lifting, in fact, any of the heavy lifting, and make it easy for you. What I'd like you to take away from this particular webinar is our program, the Catholic Energies program, can help you execute all of these energy projects. We can ensure that if you choose to do so, you don't have to put a single dollar towards any of them up front, pay for all of them through the savings that they generate, and that access to all of the partners that you would need. Mark is just probably the best of our partners, but we have others as well that work with us on the efficiency side, lighting, boilers, etc. You're going to get access to the best of the best, and we're not going to have to burden your organizations with dealing with multiple contractors. So hopefully you've heard something along the way here that intrigues you. And again, I will answer all questions towards the end, but if you have very specific situations, follow up with any of us and we can provide you with a lot more detail about how this works for your particular organization. Let me just do a scan here of the solar and see if there is a question. So typical term for the solar program, Mark, the question is, what is a typical term? Do you want to jump in and answer that one?
Yes, it can be 10 to 20 years. Normal is 20. And because of IRS rules, the investors, and our plan is they're all Catholic investors, must own the solar project for at least 5 years. With 5 years, they can take advantage of all the federal tax incentives. So after 5 years, there could be a donation to the church, and then they take a tax deduction on that, or there could be a buyout. So typical term, 20 years, and then an earlier turnover is possible.
Right. So and again, one of the things we're not covering on this webinar, but we can certainly do in more detail with any of you, are the different ways to finance a solar program. So again, the one thing I will say to you is under no circumstances pay cash for your solar if you're doing it on a Catholic property. You give up 30% tax credit, you give up the depreciation, you don't need to do that. A follow-up point to that is I have a lot of parishes, a lot of organizations tell me, well, we have donors who, readily open their pocketbooks and give money, to which I usually respond, that's fantastic. Keep them very close, obviously. But if a donor, let's say your system, I'll use a number, $100,000. If your system were to cost $100,000 and you had a donor willing to write a check for $100,000, why not give that donor the opportunity to make it an investment instead? That donor would get a $30,000 tax credit back, so it's 30% tax credit on $100,000 plus the depreciation. So maybe they would get up to $50,000 off right away, and then they make a little bit of their money back by you buying the electricity from them. So I would suggest it might even be a better way to cultivate donors by being respectful of their money and allowing them the ability to invest and not donate. So that's one big important takeaway here. Okay, there's a couple questions that come in, but I'm gonna let me cover this next slide here, and then we're actually at the end, and I'm gonna give everybody the ability to ask questions, then I'll answer all of the questions at that point that haven't been answered yet. Some of them have circled back to the efficiency stuff, so I don't wanna jump around here too much. But let me cover this slide here on education. So as I mentioned earlier, Catholic Energies is a program of the Catholic Climate Covenant. We are an education-focused nonprofit, and we prioritize education. We collaborate with educators. I'm a former teacher. I love the idea of using these projects as a way to educate students, to educate parishioners, to educate staff on the work that you're doing, and help them understand how this work can easily be transferred to their other places of work, to their places of worship, to their homes. That is something that we do. We have access, or we will provide you with access to a decade or more's worth of materials that the Catholic Climate Covenant has developed. So we have a library of resources that are at our disposal to share with you. We also look forward to working with some of you to develop specialized programs. So we are in the process right now of developing a specialized curriculum for the Sisters of Mercy organization that is looking to translate some of the great work that it's doing into sort of distill it down to topics that can be easily digested by students, by some of the sisters themselves, by other staff. So it's a very important component for us. And the last point is on the creativity part. And this will be a little bit education and a little bit about sort of practical building related materials. But we want to help you develop programs that are going to be beneficial to your communities. One such program I want to highlight here would be a green revolving fund. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I have a soft spot for them, just for folks who aren't familiar. A green revolving fund essentially sets up a program where you would invest in, let's say, a lighting project that would save $1,000 a year. And you would commit to setting aside a portion of that $1,000 a year, let's say $500, into a separate fund that when it grows to be large enough, you take and invest in another project that further lowers your energy costs. So it continues to revolve over and over again so that every project you do accelerates how much money you have to invest in future projects. This is important because I get a question a lot about helping parishes, helping facilities invest in non-energy projects that can save money. The most obvious one I get questions about are windows. Unfortunately, our program at this point doesn't address infrastructure issues like windows, insulation, weatherizing, weather stripping buildings, for example. But what a great program it would be, and what a great example you could set by using the lighting project that you did in your parish that is saving quite a bit of money, setting aside a portion of the savings from that project, and in a few years have enough money to either put a down payment towards or cover the entire cost of, for example, a window replacement project or an insulation project. So that is how our program, we believe, can be used to help you address larger needs that your facility might have in a very sustainable way. And again, set a very good example for students, parishioners, and others on how to think about these retrofits in their own lives and other parts of their lives. And that's it. I'm going to pause here, obviously, for questions. We've got about 15 minutes here left in the hour. But how to get started with us, many of you who joined from the newsletter that we sent out last week saw that we relaunched our website, catholicenergies.org. Very easy to begin with us there. There's a button that'll follow you around the website wherever you are that says Get Started Now. Just enter your information in there, forward it around. Folks can enter their information in there, and we will be in touch with you. The one thing that we would ask that you try to pull together before we have a discussion, or as soon as possible, are your utility bills. For something like solar, we're going to need a year's worth of electricity bills for all of your meters. So some of your campuses might be served by multiple meters. We're going to need all of those bills. Ideally, if you'd like to give us access to your online account, we can download the bills ourselves if you're comfortable doing that, and I promise to never pay you your electric bill for you. But that's really the only thing that you need to bring, and we will work with you. We have, again, resources at our disposal, technical resources that can help sort of dig into very specific project needs with a director of facilities or an engineer. And we also have a lot of experience working with organizations that don't have these resources. So don't fret if you are responsible for your building and you don't have an engineering degree. We promise we can work with you just as easily. So now would be the point where it would be great to have you ask questions. Again, use the questions bar on the GoToWebinar, and I'll start traffic controlling these and handing them over to Mark when appropriate. But Mark, did you have something else to add?
Well, let's see. We've got Stephen who asks if you can get a copy of the slideshow.
Absolutely. So this is going to be posted to our website shortly, and I'm going to make a point of following up with everybody on the webinar, and we will we'll attach a copy of the presentation. But certainly, would welcome the opportunity to present to, larger communities. If you've got a bunch of folks in your orbit who are interested in this, we will make sure to provide you the material to pass on to them, can do a webinar with them. And I actually, what I'd like to do for our next webinar, which will be on May 1st, so you can certainly provide folks with that information that they can see this live themselves on May 1st, is perhaps record the next webinar and post that to our website as well. So folks who want to hear my voice all year long can go on our website and do that.
Brian asks if the solar agreements qualify as a service contract under GAP, and the answer to that, Brian, is that we'll have to check with the accounting firm that we keep on retainer. It's a national accounting firm called EKS&H, and they have a specialty renewable energy department. So I will ask that question, and we'll get back to you on that. You stumped me, but we'll get an answer for you.
That's great. And Brian, it is important to know, and for those of you who may be accountants on the line, or lawyers, the technology subscription does qualify as a service contract. So again, I won't bore folks with the reasons why, but the folks who write GAAP, which are the generally accepted accounting principles, which dictate how certain types of expenses are accounted for, have said that as of the end of this year, and then next year for private companies, this year for public, next year for private, leases, capital operating leases, have to be reported as a balance sheet liability, which means that if you are trying to hide a service contract as a lease, you're going to have to move that to the balance sheet next year. That is why we like the technology subscription, because it allows you to pay as an operating expense, save your capital dollars, save your balance sheet for other projects that you may need to borrow for, but don't borrow for a project like a lighting retrofit or a boiler upgrade that we can do, again, as a service instead. Let's see, we've got the typical term. We covered that.
We've got Chuck, and Chuck asks,
yes.
We have community shared solar available in our region. Would it be possible to do projects which then share power in the larger community, or would only projects where the power is being used on site be appropriate? The simple answer is on-site saves you a lot more money. If you subscribe to a solar garden, a large array somewhere else, and the utility's crediting you, there's still some costs associated with that are more than if you have it on your own site. Battery technology and other sophisticated operating systems for the grid are coming out in the short term that will allow power sharing between even buildings and meters on the same location or in your neighborhood. When that technology comes out, we'll be able to announce the availability of it. I want to see it operate. The two companies that are working on this are doing a great job with their prototypes, but when they get on the grid, it's going to be a revolution. But in the meantime, on-site and producing not more power than you use on an annual basis is the best economics.
Great, thank you for that. Another question here about our services being provided to parish families and their homes. We focus at this point on commercial facilities, so parishes, commercial buildings, schools, hospitals, etc. That being said, if you have specific questions or are interested in residential solar, please do. This is a question from Gary. Please do feel free to contact me. We've got a couple of things we can recommend to you, and we hope to expand the program to allow again, homes and other residential facilities to participate in the future, but at this time, commercial is our focus at this point.
And Chuck asked one more.
Sure.
Okay, so he said no. I'm talking about on-site system that then shares power and gets paid for it. Yeah, and that technology is coming, Chuck. It's just not quite available yet. The utilities are pretty ferocious about fighting any flexibility from just putting solar on your own meter or meters. The regulatory environment is available for such sharing in 7 states, including Texas and California, but the technology is not quite deployed yet to do it. It's coming.
Great. Simple question. We do have a brochure. Again, we just relaunched the website. Been a busy week of travel with some conferences. I'm going to get the brochure updated on our website shortly, along with the website slides here. So feel free to download it there, or again, email any of us to get access to that. So yeah, so I'd like Chuck. It sounds like it would be great for you and Mark to connect afterwards. I will make sure that you do that, and that way you can dig into some specifics. I know of some programs out there that allow something like what you're talking about, sort of a community solar program based in your facility, but it's not. I think where the discrepancy might be between what you are talking about and Mark is talking about is making that happen sort of automatically, the payments and all of that. possibility, Mark, I don't know if you want to comment on this for folks who might be interested. Using the space that you have and leasing it out. For example, allowing somebody to put a solar array on your roof and then collect lease payments from them. I have heard of scenarios where that's a possibility. I don't know if you have anything to add about that.
Yeah, in some states it's legal, and in some utilities there's some cooperative programs like that. The general term is called a solar garden, and it was actually launched in Colorado about 7 years ago. And so that's happening more and more around the country. You still have somebody that's going to pay all the money to build the array, own the array, take the tax incentives, and make a return on their investment. But I think Chuck was more specifically, and he kind of clarified, where it's power produced at his location and getting paid for it. That's the part that's coming. I do know of it's a variation on that theme. We did a project for the Denver Botanic Gardens where they had 6 or 7 meters on their facilities, and the utility was allowing us to put the solar on 1 meter, but credit all the meters on the same site. A little variation on what Chuck said, and some utilities would allow that. Basically, pool your electricity bills and pool your solar in that way.
Very interesting. Thank you, Mark. So we've got just a few minutes left. Those are the questions that have been asked again on the webinar. If you have additional questions, now would be your chance. But as we sort of wrap up here, let me again just thank everybody for participating and let you know that we understand that this, for some of you on here, may have been, as they say, drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information. It's sort of a different way to think about it. But again, key takeaway is just to reiterate, our program focuses on Catholic facilities only. We understand that this can be a lot for some organizations to take on themselves. That's what we are here to do. For some of you, all of the things you heard may be applicable: solar, procurement, efficiency. That may be great. For others, you may have a very specific project in mind. We can work with you as well. We have been in scenarios where organizations have had quotes already, and they've asked us to review them and see if we can provide them with a better suggestion or a better quote. We're happy to do that. We're also happy to work with you if you haven't even started. So if you are at the very earliest stages of this and you just know that your facility needs work, we can certainly help walk you through the process, start to finish, to make sure, as I said, that no worthy projects get shelved due to lack of funding. So with that, I think we have run through the questions and run out of time. Again, you can contact, again, basic, if you're going to visit our website and go get to us that way, or info at catholicenergies.org will go to all of us, and we can distribute your question. Feel free to reach out to any of us afterwards, and thank you again for your time today. Have a great afternoon, everyone.